Hello, in this video I will show you how to use reference demolition and how it can help you. And this is probably one of the most important features now, because it allows you to kind of demolish any object type to any other object type, including other prefab, or maybe this can be even another Fbx asset, just with some objects. So in this first example I will use this column. As you can see, it has this concrete interior material applied to it, and as a reference demolition I set this column just a prefab for now, and it has different material. As you can see in mesh renderer, it has concrete exterior, which is brighter than this one. Just to show you what it does, when I start play mode and demolish this column, it replaces this column by the one you defined here, and then demolish this one. Well, this is the basic example. In case you want your mesh to be replaced by some other mesh, maybe it will be kind of low poly version of the subject, or maybe a different mesh with different material. Maybe it already will be damaged, so you will demolish something else, not what you actually demolishing, not what you see, uh, not what you start simulate. So next example here, I have the same column, just one mesh object type, just one mesh here, and I set as a reference, I set another prefab which I created in Unity. So I took the same column and I fragmented it to a bunch of fragments, and then exported everything into Fbx Asset using Fbx Exporter. I will show you later how to do this. And then I defined this. I created prefab. Actually, this is just an Fbx Asset. I created prefab. Another example. So I defined this just an Fbx Asset with empty root and a bunch of fragments. I set it as a reference here. And as you can see, since this is an Fbx asset, all these fragments, they do not have anything except mesh render and mesh filter. So I turn on here this checkbox, add rigid. So it will add rigid component to whatever has not rigid component. And then it will just simulate the same fragments. It won't demolish anything. It will just remove this object and replace it by this group of fragments, and then it will simulate them. So it will be very fast. You can use a lot of fragments in this case. And this is how it works. Reference demolition to another Fbx with a bunch of fragments. In this reference, I was using also Fbx asset, but this time I created it in 3ds Max. I used our 3ds Max version of plugin, and I used Pro Boolean fragmentation type, which allows you to create kind of concave. As you see, there irregular. They have irregular inner surface, not the Voronoi provides like this simple flat surface. So that will be a bunch of concave, noisy fragments. And I just warn you that will be an explosion, because it will create convex shapes for concave fragments, and they will interpolate with each other, and this is why it will explode. But you know, in some cases maybe this is what you want. And just to show you that you can use any kind of Fbx asset, not only which you create in Unity, but even if you create it in another application. So again, so you can see now it was replaced by this concave fragments. Okay, this time I will use not the mesh, but let me restart everything. So this time I will use another. I will use cluster. So I will replace my mesh object type to prefab with rigid component, which is set to nested cluster. So again, this is the same group of fragments, but they divided in different nests. In some of the previous videos, you may already see how it works, how nested cluster works. So now I will set here for this mesh object type, my reference will be this nested column with nested cluster this rigid component which is set to nested cluster. So again, what it does, it will let Demolition replace this whole object to reference here. I don't need to set here add rigid because it already has, and it will use properties of this rigid, this one. So let me drop it now. Now you can see it was demolished to this uh, nested clusters. So in this way, using reference demolition, you can have just one solid object, but then demolish it not only for a bunch of fragments, but also for another cluster. This is the way to create such effect. And in this example, I also will use cluster for reference demolition, but this time I will use this connectivity connected cluster object type. So again, you already saw how it works. It will not use nest to demolish object, but it will just extract a group of fragments near the collision area. So here my one solid object. And now you can see that it was replaced by connected cluster, and then a group of fragments were extracted at the collision. Now I demolish even more. So in this way you can, again using reference demolition, you can just replace your one mesh object to fragments which, not just a bunch of fragments which will be simulated separately from the start, but already have rigid component and set to some kind of cluster here. And next example here, just to show you random list, how it works this random list. So again, in previous examples, I defined one reference which was used for demolition, but you also can use this random list. So in this case, you can define several versions. Maybe there'll be that could be anything. Like in this case, I'm using Unity frags, which I used in this example. And also I set here connected cluster and nested cluster. So when demolition will happen, it will take randomly one one reference from the list. So it will be taken by random algorithm. So well, in this case, you can not have just one the same kind of reference, but prepare several with different, maybe one one cluster will have 10 fragments, another cluster will have 20 fragments, another will have 50 fragments. So it won't look the same every time. And then you can create one prefab and just instantiate this prefab. And when it will be demolished, it will be demolished randomly every time. Depends on how many elements you defined in random list. So again, I will start play mode. Okay, now you see this time it was replaced by connect cluster. Let me try again. Okay, it was again connected cluster. It will be really weird. It will be again connected cluster this time. Okay, now you see it was replaced by nested cluster. So you got the idea how random list work. And in this case, I want to show you that you can use not only a mesh object type, but you also can use another cluster. So you can have cluster and then you replace it by some another cluster. So in this case, this is a connected cluster, but it will be replaced by nested cluster. And again, in case you want to simulate one solid, a bunch of fragments as one solid concave object, you will need cluster, but then you may need to demolish this object to some other cluster with higher amount of fragments inside of it. So they're also possible now using this reference demolition type. So again, this is a connected cluster, but when I will demolish it, it will be replaced by nested cluster. Okay, you see how it works. And also, just in case about some user asked how to create Fbx Asset out of the box using only Unity tools and plugin. So here's my column. Just to show, I will show you quickly. So this is my one solid object here, and all I need to do is apply here, apply RayFire shader. Then I need to fragment it. Okay, now you can see I have fragmented a bunch of fragments here. So this is my empty root with a bunch of fragments. And if I will move it to, if I will try to create prefab right now, you can see now that my object, they don't have meshes anymore because prefab cannot store Unity mesh. Because for now, this mesh exists only in this mesh filter. You cannot save it only in scene. You can save this mesh only inside scene. So you need to create Fbx Asset, and to do so, you need to install free Fbx Exporter asset. In this case, you will be able. It's free and it's by Unity Technologies, so it's no problem to get with getting it. So if you when you install, here it is, Fbx Exporter. Then you can right-click on this root and then hit here Export to Fbx. Hit Export. So now you have this Fbx asset with the same fragments, but now they can be used as a source for reference demolition. So you can move them here. You can see every fragment now is referencing to this Fbx asset here. So now I can delete this one. I don't need it. And this time I will take this object, go to my, I don't need to shatter anymore. I go to my rigid component, and here where I define this Fbx asset as a reference for demolition. And basically that's it. Now we can start play mode. And demolish my object to fragments which I just created using shader component, and then export them into Fbx Asset. So this is a quick way to create fragments for your game and then save them as Fbx Asset and then use this asset as a source for your fragments. You also can create these fragments inside scene, then do some stuff with them, maybe replace material, half of them, to different material, just to show you that it works. This is kind of not what you want to do, what you probably will do for your game, but to show you that it works fine. So it looks like this. And then you can create prefab. So now we have here, this is bad prefab, which doesn't store any mesh. I will delete it. And now we have here this Fbx asset, and we have prefab created using this Fbx asset with different materials. And now I can define here not the Fbx asset, but this prefab. Also can apply rigid component, so it will use already predefined rigid component, but in this case I will just apply this prefab here, and I don't need this anymore. And let me now demolish object. Now I can see it was replaced by prefab, which I just defined, just created using Fbx Asset, which also was just created after I fragmented a solid object by shader component. So that was very quick, very basic example. Obviously, you will do something more complicated, but just to show you how it works, how quickly you can just take object, fragment it, create Fbx Asset and then use it as a source for your demolition. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching.